Hey y'all, it's Jerome here, and there's a story behind how this episode and one of the major themes of Bottomless Coffee came to be. Picture it, election night 2020. I'm with my husband and some Chinese food, putting a real cap on what was, for me, a year of campaigning. And for the world, a moment of bated breath as we waited to see who our next president would be. Now, I'd lost in a primary election, so my name wasn't on the ballot, but some friends and supporters were kind enough to write me in, so there was no pressure for me, but it was the end of a chapter. Then, the phone rings. I answer. And the friend on the line wants me to explain to some other people, and I quote, why we believe what we believe. Now there we were, 4 years of the country agonizing over every minute political detail. Just a few months after the murder of George Floyd, and some people still can't articulate what their values are. They understand that knowing what their values are is important because they made that phone call. But why can't they speak for themselves? We're going to explore that a little bit right now with Ehren Minkema. Ehren is someone who used to identify as a person with a conservative ideology, and now he identifies as a proud, billionaire tears coffee cup owning progressive. In this episode of Bottomless Coffee, Ehren is going to share his ideological journey with us. We're going to examine what he believed and when, and then we'll explore the things that caused Ehren to either stick with or turn away from the ideology that he held at the time. Now, this podcast is supported by our Patreon community members. The more supported we are, the better the podcast becomes. Please do chip in at patreon.com/bottomlesscoffee. And, spoiler alert for the puppy lovers out there, there will be a small cameo appearance by Ehren's dog, Prairie Jean. If you hear any snoring, I promise, that's the dog. Okay. Hey, and welcome everyone. I'm Jerome, your extremely caffeinated host for Bottomless Coffee. In fact, in this very special recording late at night, 7 p.m. episode, I am a little too caffeinated and having some water. Brendan, our usual co-host, is on a break this week, so I'm going to take advantage of this time alone to really talk about something that I love and Brendan doesn't love as much as I do, political ideology. Now, if you've listened to a pundit in the last 10 or 15 years, or maybe checked out a poll, you have heard that Americans are more divided than ever. But one thing I don't think we really ever talk about is how people traverse political ideologies over time. And I'm interested, as someone who loves the idea of wooing people from one ideology to another, I'm interested in figuring out what makes people change their minds, what informs their values, what are the messages that we can use that really resonate with people who aren't in our echo chamber. So I am thrilled to introduce you all to my friend and supporter and former roommate, Ehren Minkema. Hey, Ehren.
Hi, how's it going, Jerome?
I'm wonderful. I think I might describe myself as effervescent.
Oh.
Yes, thank you.
That's a fancy word.
Thank you. Well, you know what? Brendan usually gets to hog all the fancy words, and so it's my turn. It's my turn.
I'm going to see if I can try and throw in at least one or two. They might not be like the most glamorous words. Throughout is a long word.
So many syllables.
Whoa. Sign me up for Scrabble.
Okay, so before we get into it, I do want to make sure everyone knows that your Instagram is the Ehren, and that's TheEhren. That's
weird, I know, but you'll get used to it.
Thank you. There's your tagline. I was waiting.
Simon's not here, so you're doing a podcast, and I actually just started a podcast too.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if you can say just started now. We're almost at like 20 episodes, but
You're a veteran.
I actually had you on my podcast. My podcast is called Bop or Flop. I guess that's what the title is.
Yeah.
But we're on Instagram as Bop or Flop Podcast. And you came on and we reviewed the Dua Lipa Club Future Nostalgia weird DJ mix.
And well, two things. One, I had an amazing time with you, and I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. But two, I feel as though you threw a little shade at that album, but I saw your Spotify Wrapped story, and that album is way up there on your 2020 most listened to albums list.
Okay, well, come for me for that, but just so we're all clear, Future Nostalgia is a bop of an album.
Yes.
Club Future Nostalgia DJ mix, that could be left for 2020 in the dumpster fire that is. Different albums.
Props to Dua. Dua did a lot in 2020. We appreciate it.
And honestly, I'm super excited about her song that she just did with Miley Cyrus, Prisoner. So good. Have you listened?
Well, as I mentioned on episode 7 of Bop or Flop, I don't listen to a lot of music. And so, but you know what's funny? I remember my number one bop on that episode was Midnight Sky by Miley Cyrus. And we were like, when is the album gonna come out? And now that it's out, I'm like, I should really listen to that.
You really should. Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I know political ideologies are a fun topic to go with. I tried to make sure I was dressed for the occasion with my Billionaire Tears mugs and my Maggie Rogers Wants You to Vote t-shirt. Yes. I am here and ready to talk about politics, ideology, the whole thing.
Yeah, let's get into it. I have to say, if I had not lived with you, I don't think I would have ever known that you used to identify as a conservative. So I do want to start there. Were you, I want to say you were like president of the Young Republicans or something. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, if we want to talk about political ideologies, I think
that is why you're here.
It was an Yep. It was an interesting journey I've been on, I would say. I feel like it kind of, I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I was ever really aware of politics as like a thing until like maybe it was, I think, Obama's first time running for president in 2008.
Okay.
Or is it 2012? 2012. Was it 2012?
2008.
Am I like
2008. You're good.
2008.
You're good.
Technology or timelines. This is so weird. I remember being in high school, and I legitimately was just like, it kind of felt like a popularity contest, and it wasn't really about politics.
Oh, okay.
And so I remember like there was a lot of like kids in class that were wearing t-shirts or putting up whatever and just saying things that I think that their parents just were spewing out at them at home or whatever was cool to fit in. And so that was kind of my first exposure with politics, but I started to kind of develop an idea of what they were at that age. And then when I went to UMD, or University of Minnesota Duluth, my freshman year of college, one thing that I did as a tactic, which if anyone listening is going to be a freshman in college or in a new state or whatever else, one of my biggest suggestions to ever make friends and like have a social life is to get involved in every single club you possibly can.
Oh, okay.
And so I legitimately signed up for like the club fair, the organization fair. I signed up for every single one of them. I was on the Black Student Association. I went to all the different clubs, the first 1 or 2 meetings to understand like, was this the right fit for me? Was this not? Where would I be able to find my place?
Yeah.
And one of the ones that kind of stood out for me and like legitimately, I think, put me on a completely different path in life was the Political Science Association club at the University of Minnesota Duluth.
That was apolitical. It sounds like
it was like a, I would say a nonpartisan, not a bipartisan group, but it was like just a group of people that wanted to go into politics or law or whatever else, just a chance for them to kind of connect, much like there were like journalism clubs, etc. And I remember going there and people were asking me like, well, where do you stand, Ehren? What are your beliefs? And I remember them kind of grilling me, and I was telling them like, well, at the time I was kind of closeted. I was very closeted at the University of Minnesota Duluth. I'm a proud gay now.
Yeah, you
I knew I was gay back then, but I remember them asking me all these questions. I was like, I'm kind of pro-gay, and I don't really know where I stand on abortion, and like, I have a specific memory in my mind of like there was like these this program that I was a part of when I was in high school that was like called Homework Club, where we went to low-income housing like complexes and helped kids with homework.
Okay.
But I remember their moms and dads talking about how they like had iPhones and how they had like DirecTV, and to me it felt like there was some sort of like misconnection of like, why do you need DirecTV, or why do you get to have like iPhones, et cetera,
okay.
when you're doing low income? Shouldn't you be able to spend more on this or this?
Okay.
And so it like, my few life experiences had like a dramatic impact on me, being like, I think that if you work hard, you should be able to like have your own like, you reap the rewards of your own
I see where this
work.
is going.
And
okay.
And the government giving out all these free handouts, et cetera, like, those people are lazy, right? Like, I think the idea is that other people are lazy. We have a surprise guest producer, PJ, joining the party.
Hello, PJ. Hey, Prairie Jean.
I thought she was going to be joining. But like, so for me, they did like a kind of a test, and they quizzed me like 20 questions, and they pretty much told me, they were like, you can be like socially liberal and still fiscally conservative. A lot of Republicans, especially at our age, are pretty dang progressive ourselves. Like, we're actually pretty liberal. It's just like the economic side. So they were actually able to take away the burn of all the kind of the not so good parts of the Republican Party in terms of social issues, and focus just on the economy, and just focused on those, like, how big should government be? And so that's when I started to get involved in the College Republicans.
That is fascinating. For a second there, I wasn't sure if we were going to make it back to the College Republicans or not, but you took us the long way, and I appreciate it, because you mentioned a lot of things that we can unpack, right?
Yeah.
So I'm hearing that you weren't really even asked and didn't think about having to identify yourself with a political ideology until you were in college. Even though you grew up in a conservative household, like a cool Republican voting household.
Mom voted Democrat, Dad voted Republican.
Oh,
I grew up, but like they never talked about politics. That was the thing too, is like they, for all intents and purposes, they were pretty. They didn't spend time teaching me one way or the other on that.
Yeah. So, if this BuzzFeed quiz, right, that you took in the nonpartisan group, if someone had been like, oh, these answers align with the Democratic Party, you should join the Democrats, you would have considered joining the Democratic Club.
Like, legitimately 100%. I think that it was a time for me to, when you get out of high school, you're into college, you're starting to trying to find out who you are.
Yeah.
And I think with that, another identity that like people can carry with them, and they actually carry with them for, like, sometimes in a bad way today.
Sure.
Like, are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? And so I think by putting myself into an identity, it actually helped me be able to find commonalities and find ways to connect with people. And so, yeah, like someone told me, oh, you can be a Republican with us and you can be friends. I'm not going to turn away friends, I think. So that's kind of how it ended up. It was a weird kind of courting relationship there.
Well, one thing that I really love about that is that, you know, a lot of people get tired of hearing about politics and talking about politics, but then a lot of other people never even have the conversation like brought to them, right? And even though this is a nonpartisan podcast, I have to say, your story really inspires me and will probably inspire organizers out there everywhere to like really have the conversations with people and say, you know, even if they identify as a Republican, just ask, well, why is it that you identify that way? Is it that someone in your college, you know, gave you a quiz and told you that the results say Republican, or are there values under there?
Yeah, and I think at the time, I think that the biggest thing was like at the time, my ideology and my values on the world was legitimately, I didn't have, which we can get into later, but like I thought that every dollar that you make, you should be able to spend the way you want to. And
sure,
it kind of put a little bit of faith in that if I do make excess money, if I somehow do become a billionaire, I would be able to give back the way I wanted to give back into causes I cared about, which will come up kind of later in terms of this whole journey. But like, I think the idea of smaller government and that people could help people really resonated with me at that age.
Well, I mean, you're segueing right into, I guess, the next part of your journey, which was not, you know, become a Republican, you know, really get into the group and think, oh, you know what, never mind, I'm going to be a Democrat. There are actually other ideologies out there. And instead of veering to the progressive party per se, whatever it was at this time, I guess at some point after college, or maybe later on in college, you started to identify as a libertarian.
Yeah, and that was kind of what led. So freshman year was in College Republicans, and by the end of it, I was the executive director of the College Republicans in Duluth,
running like, everything,
running the show, and just like any gay boy would, I was like, this pond is too small for this big fish. Yeah. And so I went down to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus for that reason, but also because I was like, yeah, I haven't told anyone that I'm gay here, and I told myself I would, so fresh start, let's put the reset button on that one. And when I came down to the U of M Twin Cities campus, I had started to kind of have a better understanding of what the Republican Party stood for, and that, like, although my peers and my friends, a lot of them, I think, had some pretty progressive views, especially when it came to things like accepting me, individual, like as a person, they may not, like, the leadership and the people that we were helping to get elected, the people that we were going out and door knocking for, weren't all that aligned with my views. I was actually like spending time and my like hard-earned money, etc., supporting people that like didn't have my rights, even at their interest, which was just kind of a weird mix. And so when I went down to the Twin Cities campus, it was, I think, the 2012 election. There was this movement around someone known as Ron Paul. Have you heard of Ron Paul?
Okay. Yes.
So I think Ron Paul.
Other people listening maybe have not. Can you give a 10, 15 second speech on Ron Paul?
Yeah, so Ron Paul's an interesting guy. I would actually, in a lot of ways, compare him to Bernie Sanders. He's like the Bernie Sanders of the Conservative Party, or like the Republican Party, where although he says like he voted with the Republicans on a lot of issues, he was very much like small government. I don't want to be involved in your personal life or your pocketbook. Like I don't want to be involved at all.
Okay.
Whereas on the Bernie Sanders side, he's very much like government should be involved in everything, and everyone should have all this, like all the rights, the whole thing.
But
and
fiscally
so
conservative, socially liberal.
Right, but they were both like radicals of their party. And so for me, hearing him say like, I want to be out of your social life, I don't care about gay marriage, I don't care about like, he actually, I think I couldn't like speak out of his mouth. I don't want to speak for him, but like his ideology was pretty much along the lines of like, why should government even be defining marriage? Government shouldn't be in our personal lives in that issue. So like he took it a step further to go like, why legalize marriage for queer people when instead you can just make it so marriage isn't something that's important to the government?
Okay, so I'm getting a sense that your identity as part of the LGBTQ community became more important over time, and you kind of got the sense that the political community that you were in didn't have your best interest in mind. Your values weren't aligning there. The individuals were still good people, but like the party platform and the elected officials, they weren't standing up for Ehren. And so you started looking around, and I'm guessing that's how you found Ron Paul, and the message you were getting there aligned a little bit better.
Right, and so I worked and volunteered a ton with the Ron Paul campaign. I was able to, I think we ended up stealing all of the Minnesota delegates to Ron Paul for the 2016 election, which was like, we were like the one state, because Minnesota is just really weird and we do weird things. We were the one state that like had Ron Paul delegates go to the RNC. And
nice job.
But after the campaign was done, it was a question for all of us of like, what's next? Like, we all have this movement, we all have this ideology that like we were inspired by Ron Paul. And so me, along with a couple of my friends, created this group called Young Americans for Liberty that was very much about like the libertarian philosophy. And
okay, this has such a suspicious sounding name. Like now in 2020, looking back, I mean, Young Americans for Liberty, huh?
Oh yeah. Like they somehow still, I think, have my email or have my phone number, and they call me like once every couple of years.
Okay.
And I'm like, guys, I am very much not on your team anymore, but happy to ignore this number, block this call.
Well, what is it? What like made you step away from the Libertarian Party? Like it almost sounds like you were only there for the individual, like elected official. And then after he was no longer going to be like the spokesperson of the party, the relationship with the party fizzled, or with the ideology even.
I think it was something that you, not that you brought up, but I think that it's an interesting conversation about, was I think that there's one thing that still holds true about my political beliefs from then till now is that I think this two-party system just doesn't work.
It sucks.
It really sucks. Like, I don't think that people should have to choose between two things when there's so many different, like, it's a wide scale. A lot of people actually compare it to like a diamond, where it's like the social issues and the fiscal issues and like how those all play can kind of form who you are.
Yeah.
And so I think the whole purpose of this Young Americans for Liberty was, how do we infiltrate in Minnesota, like locally, like in the state and potentially even nationally? How do we find ways to be able to have the Republican Party be more liberty-minded, one, and then number two, how do we help lift up the libertarian candidates or the libertarian kind of ideologies within all of these different government forms? And that's kind of where what the whole purpose of this mission was just to kind of help with that. And by the end of that, I ended up being the chair of the Young Americans for Liberty by the end of my whole time.
Surprise.
And that's kind of what got me through college. And it wasn't until after college that things started to change in terms of what I prioritized, and my view on the world changed quite a bit.
Okay. I'm gonna say we take a break because I am deeply interested in everything that's going on, but I want to process your life story, the life of your political ideology for a minute, and then we'll be right back.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
One thing you might notice is that Ehren's ideological focus shifts with his personal values, which makes sense. When he was younger and, by his own admission, mostly concerned with his own well-being, he aligned with an ideology and didn't concern itself with other people. Which means that if you were trying to change young Ehren's mind, you wouldn't get far with arguments about helping other people. But as we'll hear in a few minutes, a person's values do change over time. Which means that an argument that wouldn't work with 18-year-old Ehren might work with 28-year-old Ehren. This is part of why communicating our values with people who don't necessarily share our values can be tough. You don't know what a person's values are unless you ask them. And it is entirely possible that when you ask them that question, they won't know the answer. So when you are entering into conversations with the goal of swaying someone's political ideology, the only thing that you can really know at the very beginning are your own values and how your values connect with someone just like an 18-year-old Ehren, a 28-year-old Ehren, or some version of Ehren whose values are still in development. You've got to be rock solid with who you are and what you believe, or your discourse with people who don't share your values will, unfortunately, be ineffective. Okay.
Love.
Are you feeling good?
Yeah. Okay. I honestly yep.
You're like, keep it going. All right. Okay, we are back. I don't know why I don't just call those breaks like coffee breaks, like the show with Bottomless Coffee. That would make a lot of sense. We're back with Ehren. We're not drinking coffee. I'm drinking water. Prairie Jean is in Ehren's lap in case we needed a Prairie Jean check. And then for the dog lovers, what is Prairie's Instagram?
It's prairie.jean. Prairie like Little House on the Prairie. .jean like mom jeans. She is sassy. She gives me attitude. She gives other people attitude. And if you listen to our podcast, you're going to be hearing her pretty regularly barking or whatever, because we don't have time to edit our podcast. I'm sure that that you're going to spend a little maybe more time on this. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. I would say you're doing so well and you're telling your story so well that maybe we'll just distribute it as is.
Who knows?
So I think where I interrupted you is you had just mentioned that things had started to change after college. So
yeah,
what happened? Was it menopause? Was it just men?
You know
what?
Yeah. So I think after college, it's weird. After college, it took me a while to find a job, to get what is quote unquote a real job, which I think is just a false term, and you should not really
Oh, sure.
Everyone's job is real, and everyone's working hard, and we're all trying to be happy. So but at the time, there's the corporate job you get after you graduate that you're using your degree for. It took me 6 months to get that.
Expectations put on you at some point. Yeah.
Exactly. And once during that time, I was starting to go, oh my gosh, I don't have a backup plan if I fail here. One, am I going to be able to survive? And then additionally, I think I started to become, my circle of friends started to be also people that were either in school or they were a little bit more liberal, gay and liberal. And so my circle kind of expanded and changed a little bit after college. But once I got my first job, shout out to Best Buy, which don't really need to give them a shout out, but
Cool. I buy a lot of stuff from there for this podcast, so it's great.
Right. It was my first kind of experience where I was making like good money, right? Like first salaried position, didn't really have a care in the world. There was not anything that I wanted, right? And so then when you take that idea where I'm like, I'm making enough money that I can pay for my rent, I can pay for my food, I can pay for my car, I can pay for everything. I'm fine.
Yeah.
You take that and seeing all of my friends that were working just as hard as me to try and land this job after college, looking at my friends that like I knew from classes that were still working as like just cashiers at like the grocery store, et cetera, it really made me feel like I mean, I am very special and I'm really cute and handsome and just the best.
So handsome. Yes.
But like,
I hear that a lot.
Other people are trying too, right? Like
100%.
that became very crystal clear and apparent to me.
You started thinking about other people is what it sounds like the change was.
Really, yeah. And I think what I ended up also kind of thinking about is if you remember like earlier when we were talking about Republican PSA class that I was, or club I was participating in.
Yeah.
They were talking about, like, I was like, yeah, if I want, like, I want to be able to choose where I spend my money and how I help people. If I make enough, I want to be able to donate to the right organizations, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
As a grown adult that's working a 40-hour-a-week job and going to the bars 3 nights a week at that age, I didn't have any time to be researching, okay, I'm going to donate $30 over here,
right,
and $20 over here, and maybe $100 over here. Like, girl, that's a lot of work. That is a lot of work. And
it's inefficient. And it doesn't make
very
sense.
Inefficient. And so I ended up kind of just like having this like kind of brain blast epiphany moment where I was like, yeah, I would rather, like, even if my dollar only turns into 80 cents in terms of the amount it's being used to help people through the government.
Yeah.
That's 80 cents more than I would be giving if I didn't give it to the government, or like if I wasn't able to do my contribution. And honestly, if they taxed me, like, I would rather them tax me like 3% more or whatever that amount is, so that other people can have food on the table, or other people like that are struggling, that are really trying to find happiness, success, joy, fulfillment, they can do the same. And so then the 2016 elections were just around the bend at that point. And that's when there was like that kind of that big difference there of you have Hillary Clinton on one side and you have Bernie Sanders on the other.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it was a really, like, even at that moment, I was still not ready yet to call myself a progressive. I was still, or like kind of I was more the moderate Democrat. Number one, I wanted a woman president. And number two, I will go down to my dying grave that like Hillary Clinton would have been one of the best presidents. She was so prepared for the job, but like, and then Bernie Sanders is just this wackadoo guy, which I supported a couple of years before, but like, I didn't need to do that wackadoo again. I was a little bit more mature and a little bit more calm. And so I ended up kind of identifying as a moderate Democrat, but like, as soon as Trump got elected, it was like a shift in me of, he is going to tear apart all the people that I care about. He is going to tear apart like all of the support that has been built up over the past 8 years with Obama. I need to, like, if we're going to make lasting change that's really going to help the people that are most in need, we're going to need to swing the pendulum just as hard the other way. And that's kind of where, over the past 1-2 years, I've really started to see myself identify more on the progressive, like, I would even go as far as to say like radical liberal in some ways.
One really fascinating aspect about your whole story, considering how Trump plays into it, is that it's like, once again, it's those elected leaders that really kind of, I don't want to say trigger in a negative sense, but if they provoke a reaction in you one way or another, right? They kind of invite you to question your values, and then you kind of realign, right? And that kind of happened, it sounds like, with Hillary, but with Trump, you were like, you know, there were red flags, there were alarm bells, there was a clear swing to the left, right? Like immediately. And I find that really interesting because it's almost like you went into like a desire to protect yourself and others. Like it was almost like you were being attacked in some way, or your community or your values or something, and that kind of helped you define what it is that you really care about in that particular moment, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, it was, I think one of the things too, as I look back at my trajectory of ideologies, is I think I see myself and I go, when I was like, I grew up in a very privileged household, like never had a want, never had a need, like
I've been to your pool. I agree with that.
Sure. Yeah, my parents have a pool. They have a pizza kitchen. They're
a pool like, in Minnesota. It's a sign. That's a sign I've learned.
we were well off, and when I graduated high school wasn't super easy for me, and so I had this idea that like whatever I do going forward, I want to do it for me, and if I do it for me, I should benefit from it. And so it was a very kind of selfish view of the world of sure. Like me first, like I need to protect me and preserve me before I help others. And I think what I've slowly learned as I've kind of met new people, had different life experiences, and just matured a lot more, is I've really been able to think about that I shouldn't just be caring about me. And it's not like, it's important to care about your neighbors. It's important to not just even care about your neighbors. It's important to care about people that live on the other side of the world. Because we're all humans and we're all we are all trying to find happiness.
We really are.
We are all, I don't think there are very many people or anyone at all that is saying, yes, I want to live on the poverty line, or yes, I don't want to have a good education. Like no one is opting into a life of a life of struggle. Yeah. No one wants that. We all want to be able to get by and have a happy life. And so knowing that I want that, I know that other people want that. I've talked to people about that, and life's a game of chance where you could be the smartest person in the room, but like, guess what? Mr. Eric Bojack over here, his dad owns the Chevy dealership, and he's going to take that over. Yeah. And he's going to end up being super well off, even though he didn't do jack shit for that. Which I don't know if this is a swearing podcast, so like bleep me out.
We'll find out.
But like I think that's kind of the big thing that's really changed in me, is I went from being very selfish to being like, I as a human that wants to love other humans, that wants other people to be happy and successful. If that's the root of who I am as a person and what I want for the world, I have to find people that that also believe in that. And that's where like, it truly does feel like the progressive side of even the Democratic Party really does want that, and does want this like, if everybody wins, we all win. So like, let's help everyone out. It's interesting.
I agree, Brendan. It is interesting to talk about political ideology. He's gonna hate that.
So Jerome, I know that you ran for office, and I think that one thing that we know about here in the Twin Cities is that we are, the Twin Cities overall is primarily like, it's very segregated, and it's also like white. Like it's very white.
Yeah.
But even with us being like white, I think the one thing that's like weird about the culture of Minnesota is we do really embody that care about each other, especially within like the 94 ring of.
Yes.
And it's the Minnesota nice, even though there's the Minnesota passive aggressive, like we genuinely do. We were raised to care about our neighbors. We were raised to care about Joe Schmo. We were raised to care about everyone. And I would say that, like, it's interesting to me to see that in Minnesota, we are probably super, super progressive, but then you go to other states and other areas, and the flavor of Democratic Kool-Aid is a lot different.
Yes.
And so one thing I would want to talk about...
At some point, maybe we'll come back and we'll continue that particular conversation, because, you know, I came from Atlanta, Georgia, where, you know, a Republican in Georgia is not the same thing as a Republican in Minnesota. And a Democrat in Georgia is not the same thing as a Democrat, as a DFLer even in Minnesota. You know, I had values that I translated into policy for my campaign, and I don't think I was the most progressive person in my race, and I was surprised. There were moments when I was like, "Oh, y'all are way left." But just going back, that thought, there is something really special about Minnesota that I've noticed, just as someone who moved here from somewhere else, regarding the way that we care about each other. If I ride a bike down the street without a helmet, my neighbors will yell at me and tell me to put a helmet on. And not because it's like illegal or anything, but because it's dangerous and they don't want anything bad to happen, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know if it's legal or not. It might be.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be like a little fun little like factoid underneath this part. It is illegal. Or something. Producer PJ might come back with that fact.
This is your second or third editing suggestion, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Who is the Drag Race, the drag queen that like was her own producer and she edited the whole season. Alexis Michelle. I think Alexis Michelle is like, everyone jokes around that she is like the producer of her season, because she's like, okay, no, you go here, cut. And that's kind of what I'm doing. Yeah. So sorry about that.
Never apologize. You're amazing. And I mean, you're absolutely right. You kind of made me like fall in love with my neighbors again, because, you know, this being 2020, I haven't seen them and hung out with them in so long. Because again, we all care about each other. And so we are wearing our mask and we're keeping distant and we're not congregating in the way that we used to. And going back to political ideology a little bit, in those conversations that people have with each other, where you really get to hammer out your values and you really get to have those deep, meaningful conversations, right, about who you are and what you believe in. It will be interesting to look over the next couple of years and see the impact that 2020 had in terms of us not being able to talk to each other about, you know, one political ideology is really trying to save us from this plague, and one is not. but we're not allowed to talk to each other in groups about it. So that will be interesting.
I think it's very interesting, and I think it kind of even speaks. Have you seen The Social Dilemma yet on Netflix?
I have not, because I'm such a social media person, and I'm worried.
I think you should watch it. It's truly eye-opening, and it's, even though like I've always been on social media with my Trader Joe's reviews, my 100 people in the room, and 99 of them don't believe in you. All the different shticks and stories that I have. And if you follow
Ehren on Instagram at the Ehren, TheEhren, you will get to see him reenact that 99 people in the room skit and give those Trader Joe's reviews.
Right. What I will say, though, is by watching that documentary, it really highlights how when we use algorithms and when we use all of these different formulas to get people to stay onto our sites longer or continue to engage with us, et cetera, it has a very harmful effect when it's kind of combined with politics, because you either have people they either want to suggest things that are super radical that will make you furious and type that like 8 paragraphs in the comments or whatever, so you stay on the site longer, you continue to engage, or it's showing you things that'll make you click like, and you'll have that small serotonin rush. And so social media, the documentary Social Dilemma is talking about how like it is the leading cause as to what is creating this division in our country. it's so interesting. And I think what I was thinking about even just today was that the idea of wearing a mask, the idea of COVID, and the idea of like, this shouldn't be a political issue.
Right. I agree.
But somehow it is. Like, I think it's just baffling to me that we're currently in a climate, a political climate, where everything and anything is going to be politicized and going to be somehow shoved into one party or shoved into another, which I just feel like the more we get into that habit, the more division we're going to have.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying it's impossible to get out of division, but as people get further and further divided, it becomes harder and harder to bury yourself out of one side or the other.
Oh, I'm like, oh no, because the reason we were having this conversation is so I could gather those stimuli that put you from one side to the other. And so, so now I really have to watch this documentary.
What I would say is, so like, if I had advice for anyone listening in terms of both how you can help change and educate your neighbors, your friends, etc.
Yeah.
It's been a really really kind of tough conversation on my side, or tough conversation just, I think anyone in this type of situation, it's tough to be able to kind of gauge that, because there's a lot of emotion attached and it's uncomfortable to talk about politics. But what I would say, and one thing that I feel like I hold true, is one thing that I try to do is I try to get my friends to experience and listen to and have encounters with people whose lives are different than themselves. Yeah. I think when we stay in our bubble of like the gay community is bad at this too, where if all of your friends are cisgender white guys, you probably have an issue, and you're probably on a private island wearing masks.
Oh my gosh.
That is a reference to Jerome's episode of the podcast. But over Labor Day weekend.
They were tested multiple times.
Tested multiple times. Like if you put yourself in a box and you only associate yourself with people that look like you, talk like you, act like you, live near you, you're not going to have a good view of the world, and you're not going to have those experiences to be able to pull from, both in terms of how you can have your own ideation and ideologies, but as well as when you're talking to others about, like, why is it important that abortion is accessible to women? Yep. If you don't have very many women friends, or have women that have had experiences with having to make that decision or grappling with that decision, it's going to be a lot harder for you to talk to your friends or your neighbors about those types of things. And so what I would highly encourage of anyone that's listening is look around probably the 10 people you associate yourself with most and go, are my group of people, the people that I talk to the most, are they diverse? And if not, who can I be reaching out to? Who can I be asking for advice on things? And who can I be like bringing into my life to help me have a better view of the world? I think when we do that, and when we exercise that ability to be able to empathize with other people's experiences, that's what's truly going to help people be able to see, oh, they do have a reason for why they believe what they believe, and maybe I need to believe that too, because they're currently not being brought along for the ride. Let me bring them along.
I did not know that you came here to preach today, but you did, and I really appreciate that. And one thing I was just thinking about is, in addition to really looking around and looking externally and seeing what you're doing, also maybe look internally and really come to grips with exactly what your personal values are. And then look around and make sure that you are living in alignment with your values. And I think that's a disconnect that a lot of people miss. Because, and I think a big example that I frequently come back to is environmentalism. A lot of people will say that they are environmentalists without really thinking about it, and without really thinking about their actions. And I'm always like, you are drinking out of a plastic bottle. Are you sure you're an environmentalist? You, as a candidate running for office, drank out of that plastic bottle, left it on the ground in the churchyard, and like left it behind. Are you sure environmentalism should be part of your platform? So just do yourself a favor, do the world a favor, double check, right? Because, you know, a lot of the time, I just had a birthday, for instance. And anytime I have like...
Congratulations, happy birthday.
Thank you. I did it. I did it again. A lot of the times the way I spend my birthday, because it's close to Thanksgiving, is in reflection. And I'm like, okay, you're this many years old. You know, where are you in your life? Are you where you want to be? Are you the person that you want to be? Who do you want to be like 5 years from now? And what do you have to do to be that person? You know, there wasn't a hard conversation for me to have with myself this year. I was like, I'm doing all right. This year. Mm-hmm. But 5 years ago, it was a totally different, it was a different vibe, I would say. And so I would encourage people to have those conversations with themselves and maybe bring your best friend with you and be like, hey, this is what I think I believe. Is that how I act? Right? Like, would you say that's true about me? Have those like vulnerable moments if you're able to. That's my 2 cents.
Not one last thing. I don't know how long you want to go with this, but like one thing I also just kind of want to plug is that, as we kind of talked about and spent a lot of time going through, is I went from 2010 to, I would say, 2018 maybe. And that was how long it took for my ideology and my thought process to change and continue to evolve into where I feel like I'm pretty firm on now, of like, this is where I think I'm probably going to be settled in for
I heard some
the long winter
vibes in there. I don't know.
When you're having these conversations with each other, when you're having conversations with someone that is so far removed from everything you stand for, even just like being like moving them an inch closer to your side of the aisle, or the way that your view of the world, over time, an inch plus an inch plus an inch, those things can turn into like meaningful change. And you can see those types of things with like Atlanta hasn't gone blue in I don't know how many
Atlanta
years
has been
for
blue.
president.
Atlanta has been blue. Georgia.
Oh yeah, Georgia. Atlanta has always pretty much been blue, I would say, right? Like, every metropolitan city is blue.
Right.
But, like, Georgia, for the first time in, like, a very long time, went blue. And that's because of inches by inches of conversations. And I also want to bring it back to, in 2010, here in Minnesota, we had the Vote No campaign for marriage equality. And it was the very first time there had been amendments that had gone through all of these different states to make marriage between a man and a woman in the Constitution, or to ban gay marriage, and they tried to turn it into like a very like right or wrong issue. And what Minnesota did, which I think is like what we need to be doing and how we can really make change, is by talking to each other, sharing your stories, sharing my story of being a queer person. If you're not queer, share the story of someone that you care about, whose life this would affect. And by doing that, we were actually able to vote no against this marriage amendment that would have had some serious implications on what the definition of marriage was in Minnesota. So with that, I think it's very important to also go, experiences and human connection is one of the most powerful tools that you can use to be able to get people that maybe aren't listening to logic on your side, because they'll listen with emotion.
And I think I think we've given at least 2 pieces of advice for what people should do. I would say one thing you should not do is like go to social media and try to change someone's mind because it won't work. And I think people get so defensive immediately when they feel attacked in that kind of a public forum, that you might end up sending people a couple of inches in the wrong way. And that's just not helpful.
creating that further division. Yeah.
Yes.
And just one thing that's super interesting. I'm sorry we're going into so many things. One other thing that's super interesting that I wanted to mention too is just like I was in high school where I just didn't even get politics, there's a good chunk of people that just don't get politics.
Yeah.
So like approach situations with, hey, would you be willing to like have a conversation with me about why I care about this issue or why I'm voting this way, or what can I do to help you become educated in your decisions? I think that even those types of things, I can speak for myself and say that I think I got at least 5 people that like either weren't planning on voting or like didn't know who to vote for. I was able to get them to like vote with me and vote for my interests and vote for like who I think their interests are too.
And that's almost a callback to 2016 with Hillary Clinton, when people didn't seem as excited, right, at the time. Certainly not as excited as Trump supporters were. But maybe if in the future, when a candidate is put up for office that people are not very excited about, one tactic is to be like, hey, you might not care so much about this candidate, but you care about me. And, you know, you got to go to the polls for me the way I go to the polls for you.
Exactly. The way I yell at you at the street to wear your helmet.
Yes.
Exactly like that. Go to the polls.
Go to the polls.
I care about you.
I love that. Well, I feel like love is a wonderful place to end a podcast episode. Thank you so much for this fantastic conversation, Ehren.
Of course. I love talking politics, and I even try and love talking politics with people that are different from me, because it just is. It's an interesting strategy game, and it's so fun and so kind of just it's what defines us, and it's so important to us. But it's also just like something that has so many different angles and so many different perspectives. So I really do appreciate being on here, and I appreciate being able to be on here for this subject in particular.
And goodbye to Prairie Jean as well.
She is sleeping. Oh, poor little girl. Oh, no, she's about to bark. That's all right.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
See ya.
Yay! One thing that will help you in just about anything, and I'm comfortable saying that no matter what you're doing, this will be helpful. It is great to have cultivated a network of people with different life experiences. I will never have the experience of growing up in suburban Minnesota. Ehren will never have the experience of growing up in Atlanta. But when we share our experiences with one another, we expand each other's worldview. That is a huge part of what the Bottomless Coffee community is about. It may be that the only thing we have in common is that we think that the world can be a better place. But from that one shared value, we will forge connections, and we will grow to accomplish great things. Join our community now at patreon.com/bottomlesscoffee. Let's expand our worldview, exchange our values, and start doing the work we need to do in order to leave this world better than how it was when we found it.